There's a specific silence that happens when you check your savings account, and the number finally has a comma in it. Not a big comma, not life-changing money by most standards, but a comma. And something shifts, quietly, almost invisibly, in the way you see the world. It's not the number itself. It's what that number does to your thinking, your decisions, your tolerance for risk, your relationship with time, even the way you respond to stress. Most people assume that money changes your life once you have a lot of it. But the research and the lived experience of millions of people tells a different story. The first $50,000 doesn't just pad your savings account. It rewires how your brain operates. And understanding why, that's something almost nobody talks about honestly. My name is Garrett, and I've spent a lot of time studying why some people seem to reach a certain financial threshold and then suddenly, almost effortlessly, keep building, while others earn decent money for years and feel like they're running in place. What I kept finding wasn't really about income. It wasn't about discipline. It was about what happens to a person's psychology the moment they accumulate a real financial cushion for the first time. And once I understood it, it changed the way I looked at almost every financial decision. That's what today is about. Here's what people usually say about money. Once I start earning more, everything will be fine. It sounds reasonable, logical even. More income equals more savings equals more security. But that's not how it actually plays out for most people. Studies on lottery winners, people who get major salary increases, and even households that suddenly inherit money all point to the same uncomfortable reality. More income, without a corresponding shift in psychology, almost always gets consumed. The reason isn't laziness. It isn't stupidity. It's that human beings are built to adapt. When income rises, spending rises to match. What felt like a luxury at $40,000 a year starts feeling like a necessity at $80,000. And the gap between what you earn and what you keep stays exactly the same. So the question isn't just, how do I earn more? The more interesting question, the one that actually predicts long-term financial outcomes, is what causes some people's brains to break the cycle while others stay trapped in it. The answer, more often than not, traces back to one moment. The first time someone accumulates a meaningful savings buffer. And for most people in middle income ranges, that number tends to land somewhere around $50,000. Think about what life looks like before you have any real savings. Not just a little in a checking account, but actual money sitting somewhere. Money that doesn't have a job. Money that isn't already spoken for. For most people, the financial experience before that moment is what psychologists call a scarcity mindset. And scarcity does something strange to the brain. When you're operating from financial scarcity, your cognitive bandwidth narrows. Research from Princeton and Harvard found that people dealing with financial pressure lose roughly 13 IQ points worth of mental capacity, just from the cognitive weight of worrying about money. That's not a metaphor. It's measurable. When you're always in the red or barely in the black, your brain becomes short-term obsessed. Every decision, even ones unrelated to money, gets filtered through the question of immediate survival. You take the job that pays more now rather than the one with better upside. You avoid the dentist until a problem becomes expensive. You skip the car maintenance until you're stranded. Every choice shrinks to the horizon of the next 2 weeks. This isn't a personality flaw. It's a predictable cognitive response to operating without financial cushion. The brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do. Focus on immediate threats when resources feel scarce. Now watch what happens when that cushion appears. The moment someone reaches a meaningful savings threshold, And $50,000 is a common inflection point, though for some it's less. Something measurable shifts in how the brain processes future decisions. The constant low-frequency stress of what if something goes wrong starts to quiet down. Not disappear, quiet down. And in that quieter cognitive space, a different kind of thinking becomes possible. This is where it gets interesting. Because it's not just about having money, it's about what that money represents to your nervous system. Time. Before a savings cushion, time feels tight. One bad month, a car repair, a medical bill, a job loss, and everything collapses. Your decisions reflect that fragility, even when things are going fine. You spend to soothe the anxiety. You avoid thinking about long-term because the long-term feels theoretical, and the present feels urgent. Once that cushion exists, time expands. Psychologically, you're no longer one emergency away from crisis. And when time expands in that way, a person's entire financial behavior tends to shift. Not because they're suddenly more disciplined, but because the brain's threat response has dialed down. You start thinking in longer cycles. You make decisions based on where you want to be in 3 years, instead of where you need to be next Thursday. You start tolerating discomfort in the short term. A lower paying job with better growth potential. A tough conversation about a raise. Skipping a purchase that used to feel mandatory because your brain has proof that waiting pays off. The first $50,000 is proof, evidence. Your brain has something concrete to point to and say, accumulation is real. It actually works. I've done it. That psychological shift, from scarcity cognition to what researchers call abundance orientation, doesn't require being rich. It requires crossing a personal threshold where your brain stops interpreting every decision through the lens of immediate survival. And here's the thing about that threshold. Reaching it tends to compound, not just financially, but mentally. People who accumulate a meaningful first savings buffer are statistically more likely to contribute to retirement accounts, more likely to take on calculated risks, more likely to negotiate salary, and more likely to invest in skills and health. All behaviors that build long-term wealth. It's not a coincidence, it's causation. The money creates a psychological foundation that makes wealth-building behavior feel possible, natural, even enjoyable, instead of abstract and unattainable. But there's something else the first $50,000 does that almost nobody talks about. It changes your identity. Money is deeply tied to how people see themselves. Before a real savings buffer, most people quietly carry a background story. I'm not the kind of person who has savings. It's not conscious. It rarely gets spoken out loud, but it shapes behavior constantly. Small purchases feel fine because, why not? You don't save anyway. Financial planning feels pointless because you never follow through. Investing feels like something other people do. That identity, left unchallenged, is self-fulfilling. You spend because you believe you're a spender. You don't save because saving feels inconsistent with who you are. The first real savings milestone cracks that story open. Not completely, not overnight. But once a person has physically watched money accumulate, has seen the number grow from $8,000 to $23,000 to $41,000 to $50,000, they have evidence against the old narrative. And brains respond to evidence. Slowly, the identity begins to shift. I'm someone who has savings. Starts to feel true. And once it feels true, protecting and growing those savings starts to feel natural. This is what people mean when they talk about money having momentum. It's not just about compound interest, though that matters enormously over time. It's about the psychological feedback loop between who you believe you are and the financial choices you make every single day. There's a quiet moment that a lot of people who've crossed that first savings milestone describe in similar ways. It usually happens unexpectedly, maybe at work, maybe in the middle of some ordinary Tuesday, where they realize they're not as afraid as they used to be. Not fearless, not reckless, just less afraid. An annoying work situation that would have felt like a trap before, because leaving would mean no financial runway, now feels manageable. A decision to invest in a course or a credential that used to feel financially irresponsible now feels reasonable. The question, can I afford this, starts getting joined by a different question. Is this worth it? That second question is only available to people who have options. Options require margin. Margin requires savings. And savings requires crossing that first threshold. What the first $50,000 really buys isn't security in the traditional sense. It buys optionality, the ability to say no to bad situations, the ability to take small bets on better ones, the ability to wait for the right opportunity instead of grabbing whatever's available out of desperation. And optionality, the freedom to choose, is, in the long run, one of the most valuable things a person can possess. If any of this sounds far away, the honest path to $50,000 usually isn't dramatic. It rarely involves side hustles or massive lifestyle overhauls. It's mostly about two things: slowing the outflow and creating automatic systems for the inflow. The slowing of outflow isn't about deprivation. It's about catching the spending that happens on autopilot. The subscriptions you forgot about, the convenience purchases that accumulate invisibly, the upgrade you made years ago that you no longer notice but still pay for. Most people who do a genuine audit of their monthly spending find $200 to $400 that disappeared without a conscious decision. Redirecting even half of that consistently changes the trajectory over 18 to 24 months. The automation piece matters even more psychologically. When savings happens automatically, transferred before you ever see it, your brain stops experiencing it as a deprivation. You don't feel like you're giving up $500 a month. You just have $500 less to work with, and you adjust. It's the same adaptation that causes lifestyle inflation to happen painlessly. You can use that same mechanism in reverse. The goal isn't to hoard money or live anxiously below your means. The goal is to cross the threshold, to give your brain its first real proof that accumulation is possible. Because once it has that proof, the way you think about money changes. Not overnight, but in ways that are deep, measurable, and durable. There's a version of financial advice that talks about millionaires and investment portfolios and financial independence. And those things matter, but they can feel so distant that they become abstract, aspirational wallpaper rather than real direction. What's rarely discussed is the specific, psychologically significant moment of a first meaningful savings milestone. The way it quiets a low-grade anxiety you didn't even fully realize you were carrying. The way it subtly rewires how you see yourself. The way it shifts your time horizon from 2 weeks to 2 years. The first $50,000 isn't the finish line. It's not even close. But it's the moment when the game starts to feel different, when the rules begin to make sense, when the distant things stop feeling quite so out of reach. And maybe the most important thing to understand is this: the goal of that first milestone isn't to have $50,000. It's to become the person who does.